In this video, we'll be reviewing what ClickUp recurring tasks functionality is, how to use it, and how you can set it up inside your ClickUp workspace with a couple of examples from this video. Let's dive into this. The easiest way I found to understand ClickUp recurring tasks is with going through a couple of examples that I put together inside ClickUp. So let's have a look at this. Over here, I have a list of tasks that we're gonna go through, and we're gonna set the recurring settings for these different types of tasks together with you. Before we dive into the examples, in order to access the recurring settings, you can do this either by clicking due date column inside your list or table view inside ClickUp. You can just click on that field and it's going to show you the way you set up due dates. At the bottom, it shows you set recurring settings. You click on that and you have all the options available to you. Or you can open the task and access the same due date from within the task by clicking the due date and clicking on the set recurring option at the bottom left corner of this small pop-up window. Now, as we know where to find it, let's dive into the first example. The first is going to be send daily email newsletter. And I want this task to recur daily, as I mentioned over here, only during weekdays. I don't want to send newsletter to my subscribers during weekend times. And this is what I'm going to do now. So again, we're going to go to due date, click it and access it from this view. I'm going to set the due date. So I want to start doing this task on Monday. And I'm going to click and navigate to set recurring, where it will show me all the recurring settings that are available to me. The first drop down in here is going to allow us to select what is the cadence. So how often do we want to complete or to have this task updated or to create a separate task? And I'm going to show you in a minute how to do this with the recurring settings. In this example, I'm sending this newsletter daily. So I want to select the daily option, but we also have weekly, monthly, yearly, days after, and custom options, which we're going to cover in this example just in a minute. In this example, I'm going to say daily. The next drop down allows you to select how do you want or when do you want that task to recur, like what is the condition under which that task recurs, whether it's the status change, when your status changes to closed, when your status changes to done, or maybe on a schedule. In this example, we're going to keep it simple and we're going to keep the on status change closed. I'm going to cover the rest of the options in just a second with a different example. With the daily option over here, it allows us to also skip weekends. If you remember, I mentioned that I do not want to send this newsletter on the weekend, so I'm going to click on skip weekends here. On the right hand side, you can see this nice calendar view, which allows you to see how and when that task will recur. So basically, it tells me in this light blue color when that task is going to recur. If I change it to weekly over here, you can see it changes this colors in here. So again, it's very easy visually to see how this recurring settings are going to work. So I'm going to click on skip weekends here. We also have the create new task option. So there is an option for us when this condition is met and we update the status to closed, we can also create a new task instead of using the same task over and over again by just updating the due date. For now, I'm going to skip this option. I'm going to show this again in this next example of how this looks and how this works. The next option is recur forever. Sometimes you might not want to recur or this task more than X number of times. So for example, I want this recur 100 times, and after that, I don't want it to recur. So I'm going to put 100 times here. Another option, you can also have the end on date, which will allow you to end the recurring setting. Let's say on the 25th of October, I want to stop to record this task. I don't need to do it anymore. Let's say I'm closing my newsletter or whatever the case might be. For now, we can click on recur forever so it doesn't limit us. And then I also want to update the status of the task. We're not creating a new task. This is why I want to update the status of the existing task back to do. So I'm going to show you how this works in just a second. I'm going to click on save as soon as we're done completing these steps. And now what should happen, I have the due date for my sent daily email newsletter on Monday. As we said in the settings, when I close the task, right? Let's just actually go and check what was the setting on status change close. So when I change the status to close, it should take a minute, but it should create and update the status of the task one more time to do. So now this task disappeared from the view, as you can see here, but now it should come back in the to-do status with the due date updated for the Tuesday instead of Monday, as we saw it earlier. So let's just refresh the page and see how it looks. All right, so you can see that task popped up over here. Now that instead of Monday, we have the due date for Tuesday. You can click on this and you can see again the remaining dates highlighted in light blue color over here. So if I change the status again to closed, that due date is gonna update to Wednesday one more time. So again, it's as simple as that. Just by changing the status, it uses the same task and it just updates the due date together with the status for that task. And you can just reuse the task over and over and over again until I'm done sending all those newsletters over the next couple of months, let's say. Okay, so we waited a couple of seconds and now we can see that the same task populated here, and now it has the due date for Wednesday. So again, this functionality or this specific setting works. And now what we want to do, we want to get to the next example. Now, instead of having the daily email newsletter, what we want to do is we want to update our timesheets weekly. So let's say we're doing this every single Friday of the week. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna go navigate to due dates. Again, click over here, set recurring. I want to start doing this task beginning next Friday. So I'm gonna put the October 10th as the first initial due date. Now we're gonna select from this dropdown, instead of daily, we're gonna select weekly. So on weekly, previously we used on status changed closed. Now you can also use the on status changed done, which really is not very much different except for how you name your statuses, what's the structure of your list, because you might use your different statuses for different purposes. So again, it just allows you to select either done or closed type of statuses to trigger this recurring functionality. So I'm gonna change it to done so we can see how it works in this case. And in this scenario, instead of reusing the same task, I want to create a new one. So I'm gonna click on create new task option over here, and I'm gonna click on options. As you can see over here, it allows you to customize what parts of the task do you want to move to the next task or to the recurring task. Again, we can keep comments, description, dependencies, SNEs, pretty much everything that we had in the previous task can be copied over into the new task. Now, this becomes extremely powerful if you want to use your recurring tasks from some sort of dashboards or reporting things in ClickUp, so that every time you're doing or completing the task, you're some sort of taking a snapshot of the previous task that you completed, and you're not reusing the same task, but you're creating a new one. And then again, the new updated version of the task then gets completed by you or your team. But as we reviewed this option, again, let's just leave options as it is in default over here. We're gonna click on recur forever, and let me uncheck this option and just select it to 10 times instead of 1. What it tells me is, you can see by clicking it on 10 times, when I scroll down over here, it's gonna end on December 19th. So it's gonna recur 10 weeks, 10 Fridays, and after December 19th, it's gonna stop this setting. So again, this way it allows me to kind of modify the settings based on my whatever I need to do or the workflow that I have in place. And I'm gonna also update the status of the new task to do over here. So we're gonna click on save. And now again, this setting that we put there, or the trigger that we put there for recurring settings, was the change of the status to done. So you can see I have the done status over here. I'm gonna change it. And now what we expect to happen is we accept the due date to be updated to the following Friday instead of this Friday, right? And we also expect the new task to be created in the to-do list. So this is what we actually have here. You can see update weekly timesheets, and then the second task, update the weekly timesheet, was created here. We can see that the due date is now the 17th, not the 10th, right? The task for the 10th is already completed. So this way we can now work with this task. And by the way, this new recurring task keeps all the recurring functionalities or settings that you set up in it. So the old task was kind of the recurring functionality or settings were removed from that task and moved to the new task, if it makes sense. But when you open the task again, you can see that technically, if we had any custom fields in here, any descriptions or any comments, those things would be copied over into this new task. And now we can update weekly timesheets with having all the information that we submitted in the previous task during the previous week. All right, so now as we covered the weekly and daily recurring settings, let's jump into monthly recurring settings. And here I have a create and send monthly invoices. Again, most of the time we send invoices monthly. So this is why I'm gonna set the due date for, let's say it's gonna be the 15th of every single month. So on the 15th of every month, I want to send the invoice to my customers. This is why I'm gonna click on the due date starting 15th. I'm gonna set recurring settings over here, and I'm gonna change the option instead of weekly to monthly. Now here, I'm gonna use, instead of on a status change, I'm gonna use on a schedule. What on a schedule does is, while changing the status is more flexible option because you control when the task recurs or when the new task is gonna be created, on a schedule allows you to trigger that creation or recurring setting without actually changing any status. When the due date arrives, the new task or the recurring task is gonna be updated. So let's see how it works in just a second. I'm gonna keep recur forever option over here. I'm gonna click update status, and I will change the status to do of the task. And as you can see over here in the light blue color, it sets the due date for the 15th of every month. What I can also do is if I open this drop down here with monthly recurring setting, I can also change for it to be the third Wednesday of every single month. So it sees actually that in October, the option I'm selecting is the third Wednesday. So it says, now you want to have your task recur every third Wednesday of the month. I can say that. And if I select that option, you will see that now the next month is going to recur on the 19th, not on the 15th, just because the third Wednesday is going to be the 19th of November. I can also select the first day and the last day of the month. Even if I set the due date for this task to be 15th, I can still say I want this task to recur on the first day of every single month, and then it's going to update and populate that option over here. Again, this field is dynamic, so you don't need to tell ClickUp how many days in a month there is. So if there is 30 days in a month, it's going to put the 30th as the end. If there is 31 days in the month, it's going to put the 31st. And again, we're going to keep the on schedule option here. All these options are going to be checked, and I'm going to click on save. Now, as we do this, in order for us to test on a schedule, we have to make sure that the due date of the task is now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the task, and instead of having the due date for today, I'm going to set the due date for the 15th. I'm going to set it for today, and I'm going to set the time for 12:38 p.m., which is going to be in 1 minute. I'm going to save that, and let's just give it 1 more minute and see how that on schedule trigger works. All right, so now we can see it says today 12:38 p.m. This is the time right now, so it goes into overdue task, and it might take a couple of minutes to process this and to actually update the recurring task. But let's wait a couple of seconds and I'll show you the end result. All right, so I had actually to modify the due date to be today again this time, and also had to update the recurring settings to repeat on every 4th of the month. So this way, when the due date comes, and I updated it to 12:42, just to save you some time, you can see that this task still remains in to do. So we haven't completed it yet technically. It goes into overdue, so we still have to complete it. It's a separate task, and we also have a duplicated task down here at the bottom. The new updated due date of the task is going to be the 4th of the next month, of the following month, with the same time. And again, when that time comes, you're going to have another task or duplicated task created with the new due date updated in that task. And again, this way you're not losing track of the tasks that you haven't completed previously. So I can still go and check this overdue task to in progress, and I can at the same time start working on the next task that I have for the following month. So again, keeps it much more flexible than having a single task updated over and over again in the recurring settings. So this might be one of the reasons you might want to use recurring settings with creating new tasks instead of using the existing task. And so we've done the daily, the weekly, the monthly. Now let's jump into the annual task. So this is something that we do every single year. And in this example, this is probably many business owners do this, is submitting 2025 annual tax return, right? Whether it's 2025, 2026. Actually, for the sake of the test version, we can remove at the year of the task so that when we recreate it, it doesn't say the actual year, and we're a little bit more flexible there. I'm gonna go into the due date, click set recurring, and in this case, I'm gonna choose yearly. Again, this gives us the same options, whether we want to be the new task to be created on status change or on a schedule. I'm gonna select on status change, so I don't want technically the next task to be created before I complete the first one, even if the first one goes overdue. So this is why we're going to keep that option there. And then the next is I'm going to be creating the new task here. We can keep the standard options again here for creation of the new task. I'm going to recur it, let's say, for the next 5 years, right? So I'm gonna go click over here, 5 years. I'm going to update the status to do. The due date, let's say the due date for this task is going to be today, and I'm going to click on save. Now over here again, you can see in order for us to see the next task that's going to recur, we need to scroll to the next following year, September. This is actually 2029, and on the 4th of September 2029, this is where we're going to see the following task created. Again, the same going to happen 2026, 27, 28, 29, and then if I go to September 2030, it should not be there. No, actually it is there. 2031, we should not see it because we only repeated 5 times. So September 2031 is not there anymore because we just repeated 5 times. If we put it 6 times, it should show over here. Perfect. So we're going to click on save. Now again, the same thing is going to happen here. As soon as I get to the task, I submit the annual tax return. I'm going to click and I'm going to close the task. I'm going to change the status to close. What it should do, it should create a new submit annual return task over here, and I can open it. I can see that it's October 2026. For some reason I was saying September. All that time it was actually October. So 2026 over here, and we can see that the recurring settings are still in place for the next 6 years. Perfect. So if I check it to close one more time, it's going to create one more task for 2027. Again, the same is going to happen if I do this action for 2028, 29, 30, and 31st. After that, the task is not going to have the recurring statuses or settings updated. Let me actually show you how this looks. All right, so I just updated all the tasks and completed all the tasks way down to 2031. And you can see over here that at October 4th, 2031, the recurring settings disappeared. So if we complete this task, the following task for the following year is not gonna be created. This is because I repeat this task 6 times, and again, after the 6th time, which is in 2031, this task is not gonna be used anymore. So if I close this, we'll not see this task any longer in the list. Perfect. After reviewing this more standard versions of the recurring settings for daily, weekly, monthly, and annual tasks, now let's jump into the 2 other options, which are a little bit more flexible and gives you a little bit more agility when you set up recurring settings. The first one is, let's say the task should recur 14 days after its last completion. So no matter when we complete the task, whenever we finish the task, we want that the following task to be created in 14 days, or to be due in 14 days. This way, we're gonna go to recurring settings. Let's say I have one task that I have to complete today, and then instead of selecting daily, weekly, monthly, yearly options, we're gonna click on days after. And here I'm gonna say I want this task to be created 3 days. Let's put number 3 in here after the task is closed. Again, we can select done over here, or we can choose closed. It doesn't really matter. And I do not want to create a new task. I want to recur forever, and I want to update the status to do. I'm gonna click on save. As you can see, it doesn't pre-fill the calendar view with that light blue buttons over here. It doesn't show me where that due date is going to be because it doesn't know technically when I'm going to complete this task. So if you click on save, now we can go to the task and we can complete this task. So what we expect to happen is that the due date of the following task, or in this case the same task with the new due date, is going to be in 3 days after the completion, meaning in 3 days after today, which is October 7th. So let's close the task. All right, so I closed the task, and actually, even though I put here 14 days after its completion, we mentioned 3. So it put the due date, instead of October 4th, which is today, put the due date for October 7th. Now, the same technically would happen if I put 14 days in here and I click on save. So if we have 14 and I update. Again, now if I complete the task, even if I complete the task before the due date technically comes, it's gonna update the due date for 14 days, not starting from the due date of the task, but starting from when I completed the task, starting from today. So now if I update it 14 days after the day of completion, it should be the 18th, not the 21st. So let's go and check how it works. I'm going to click on close. Again, it will take probably a couple of seconds, so I will want to reload the page. And here we go. This is the task. Now it set the due date to 18th, as I said, not the 21st, because again, it counts 14 days beginning when the task is done or closed, not when the due date is set. So this is how this part of the recurring functionality works. Now, the last piece that we have left is the recurring task with weird frequency. Now, sometimes you might need to record on Tuesdays and Thursdays of every week, or you might want to record on every 3rd day of the month, or something like that. For those options which do not technically fit into these categories over here, we have a custom setting. So if we click on custom, it gives you a little bit more flexibility. So what you can do, you can say how often do you want this task to recur? Every week, every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, maybe every 3 days, right? If we put 3 over here, every 3 days, and then it updates. You can see over here, pre-fills the dates of how it's going to look in the calendar. You can still use the same triggers. You can still use the change of the status or on a schedule, and you have absolutely the same options for skipping weekends, new tasks, recur forever, or updating the status of the task. Now you can see because we're using days here, if we select weeks, it's gonna show us different fields. And now over here, we can select if we want this to repeat, let's say every 1 week, and I want this to happen on Mondays and Fridays, not Saturdays. So this is how it's gonna look. The task is gonna recur on every Monday, and Friday during the following weeks. Now, if I change this to months, I can also select whether it's gonna recur on a specific date, and I can select different dates. I can select multiple dates. I can select the 8th, whatever the date you decided to be. Again, the same triggers apply for the monthly recurrence. You can also create the new task with the same options and also update the status of the task. Over here for months, what it also does, it lets you switch between recurring on a specific date of the month or in a specific weekday. So this way you can see that you can say by week, every month, and then we're gonna say on the first week, and we want to be on Tuesdays of every first week of the month. And again, when task closed, we also create the task, recurred forever, and update the status to do. Now, the last option here is the year. So it technically follows the same options we have here in the first drop down. So in the year, you can select the month. And again, over here, let's say it's going to be February the 14th. And then we can update the trigger. Let's say I'm done. And I don't want to create the task. Let's say I want just to update the status and I want to recur it for days. And again, this way, you'll be able to see the 14th of February. And then the same then I apply to the 2027. 28, 29, and 30. After that, the recurring settings are gonna disappear. And again, if I click on save, let's actually change this for now for testing to 1 every day. I want to skip weekends and I want to repeat it 40 times. I don't want to create a new task, but I want this to be on closed. And I'm gonna click on save. So now as we do this, the due date of this task is gonna be, let's say Tuesday. And as I do this, I'm gonna start with closed, and we're gonna have to wait a second, and the new task will populate again with updated due date for tomorrow. All right, so this is the recurring task with weird frequency, and this is the Wednesday, the due date. Again, we could probably put something a little bit more flexible and a little bit more weird in terms of the recurring settings, but again, we just selected the easiest path. We can just say 3 over here, and again, we can modify it a little bit more, but just not to take a lot of your time. Again, you can play with this yourself and see what suits best to your specific workflow and to your specific business use case. We've covered a lot in this video about ClickUp recurring tasks, and I was trying to share everything I knew with those examples I presented to you. So I hope that was helpful and you could follow all the steps inside your ClickUp workspace to see how it applies to your workflows and to your business processes. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.